Hi, I'm Megan Denver, and I'd like to welcome you to my NAPPC talk, which is beekeeping for rural development. Um, by way of a background, I'm a beekeeper here in the Hudson Valley of New York. It's a tremendously great place to keep bees. I have a shop called Hudson Valley Bee Supply where we teach beekeeping, we sell honeybees, and all the gear you need to keep bees. My journey to rural development really came about when we started teaching beekeeping. And I thought about how beekeeping really can create a conservationist in someone because they start to think about more outside of just, I'd like some honey for my bees, but where are my bees foraging? Is the forage clean? Is it abundant? And are they going to plant for their bees? And kind of all those use of pesticides, all those kind of issues. And I found that really fascinating. And about that time, I learned about a charity in Wales called Bees for Development. And that also piqued my interest because by teaching beekeeping in countries that have economies that might be depressed, in areas where there might be severe poverty, but there are bees, you can really make an impact on people's lives. So that really fascinated me. So I'd like to take you on that journey of what beekeeping can have on impact on people's lives. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. So a little bit more of my background. I serve on the board of Pollinator Partnership. I'm currently on the executive committee. I'm the treasurer. And that also came about thinking about more than just honeybees. We're thinking about all of our pollinators. And the great thing about beekeepers is they end up planting and thinking about other insects, which can really drive that, like I said, a more conservationist outlook. I also sit on the board of Apimundia, which is the largest beekeeping federation in the world. We just finished up our last Congress just a couple of weeks ago in Copenhagen. We had a little over 8,000 beekeepers, about 300 talks, and there are beekeepers from all over the world. And my commission is on rural development. So all of my talks were people working in projects in rural development or were actually participants in projects. It was a really interesting meeting. We have these congresses every 2 years. And my last role is a trustee for Bees for Development. As I mentioned, that's a charity based in Wales, and they do really beautiful work, and I'd like to share some of that with you today. First, let's get back, we'll go to basics. First, we're going to talk about bees, biodiversity, food, kind of where bees fit in our livelihoods. So we know that they're crucial for biodiversity, and that really comes from their relationship with plants, that interdependency on plants and pollination and bees. And that then, of course, provides a basis for our food chain. So plant pollination, when we think about it, we think about probably some of the fruits, vegetables, but we're also talking about food crops and medicinal plants. And so let's talk a little bit more about pollination. So you guys have probably heard the statistic that about 1/3 of our food is pollinated by honeybees. And you know that statistic can come and go, but it really is important. Honeybees are super important to our the way we're growing vegetables and fruits right now. We've really tied honeybees into that. Some of the crops I'd mentioned a little bit, but here's some other ones. You think about even macadamia, and that's melons, zucchinis, cucumbers. And then another part of that is also livestock forage, which you might not consider. So seed crops like red clover and alfalfa, cotton would be another seed crop. Onions is a seed crop. So as growers are growing for seed, those plants need to be pollinated. And those are mostly done by bees and more specifically honeybees. Here's a statistic from a few years ago that 12 billion of our US economy was driven by pollination from honeybees. So some of the main threats to bees is going to be pesticides. We've all probably heard about the neonicotinoids and the combinations of a lot of our fertilizers, our pesticides, our herbicides, our fungicides are really taking their toll on bees. Intensive agriculture, so monocultures. I think what comes to mind for me is almonds. Pollinator Partnership is doing amazing work with growers in California and their almond orchards to try to create more pollinator pathways and more forage for the native pollinators, and doing really great work on that. And also climate change. So this is going to be a bigger issue. How do we tackle climate change? And there's lots of conversations going on about the climate change, but it is really impacting our bees. It's impacting their forage. And here in the Northeast, it's also impacting their ability to overwinter. We have an expectation that we'll get a certain number of cold days, certain numbers of foraging days. We're ending with drier days, shorter winters, and that's really affecting our ability to overwinter our bees. So here's kind of the heart of what I'm talking about, which is beekeeping and rural development. So as I mentioned, beekeeping creates an economic incentive for people in developing countries because that is a product that they can then sell. So then again, creating that environmental steward, they're going to think about the habitat and their food sources for their bees and begin to think about that and protect those sources for their bees. Biodiversity, so we're looking for pollination services. And that is a really interesting idea, that pollination services by bees is important in some of these countries as well. And I'm going to share with you a little bit about what full pollination looks like for someone in a country that is has a developing economy. Oh, before I do that, I'm going to talk about the beekeeping virtuous circle. So this is something that for me as a visual person really kind of strikes a chord with me. So if we think about bees, people, and biodiversity, so bees need a healthy environment. They can provide income for people. So then the people, if they're going to take care of that environment, creating more biodiversity in that environment, the bees will be healthier and then be able to take care of the people. And I think this is just a really good example for me to be able to look at something and go, oh, I see how the three are actually connected. So this is a study done by Bees for Development in Ghana, where Bees for Development has a really strong footprint. And this was done years ago now in cashews. And the question was, are these cashew trees being fully pollinated? And these are in smaller orchards. These aren't like big orchards. These are trees like less than 70 trees per farm. And the reason is that that's where you can have the most impact, right? These are the people that really could use an economic boost. And if you don't get anything from this talk, this is a picture of a fully ripened cashew. So at the bottom there is actually the nut in a casing, and the top is a fruit, which actually can be eaten as well. So here's how they proposed this study to be done, which was two orchards. We put bees on one did not have bees. We also trained the farmers in data collection. The picture there is also of a hive that's made locally using just kind of local timber, easily accessible lumber. So here's the results. Kind of amazing if you look at these numbers. So you can see the yield was increased by 116%. And that is an amazing increase on its own. And you think about full pollination, that's kind of another conversation we're having here in the US, which is are our crops being fully pollinated? Because if they're being fully pollinated, we have less inputs, less fertilizers, less pesticide use, and that is actually better for our environment. We know that. So full pollination is really something that globally we should be looking at to achieve. And then here's really the impact we're looking for, which was from $176 to $566. So trees that are being fully pollinated, and then also income from honey and beeswax and propolis. Propolis is another thing I can have a whole talk on, but it's a really interesting product that bees produce. So this is how it was done. So Bees for Development went in, found young people that were unemployed but were interested in bees. So they were trained as master beekeepers and everything they needed to know about beekeeping. And then they were tasked with 10 farmers to keep bees on their farms. So each farm had 4 hives on it. So each of these beekeepers were in charge of 40 hives. Now there was an option there where the farmers could then become the beekeepers, or the farmers themselves said, that's fine, you can be the beekeeper. But the profits from the honey and beeswax and propolis from these hives was divided between the master beekeeper and the farmer. We also had it's funny, over Zoom, you can go back and correct things, but I think I'm just going to go plow forward on this because it's recorded, that temptation of I'll re-record this, but I'm going to plow forward. So this is an image of one of our master beekeepers proposing this idea to a farmer, and that's his supervisor there in the back. And that other image is the level of economic depression we were addressing in this area in Techem in Ghana. So this is him putting some of his hives on this farm. You can see these are built using very rough materials. This is a very low cost hive. It's a top bar hive using just the materials that they have available to them. And then on the other side here is a cashew that's just coming on. So this has been a very successful program. And each of these beekeepers was able to continue on through many years of beekeeping. And not only do they teach beekeeping to the farmers, but they also teach them a little bit of pest management. And one of those is using weaver ants. These are really interesting ants. They're ferocious little beasts, and they will keep all insect pressure off of these cashew trees, which is amazing. They don't affect the honeybees because they'll just come in to pollinate, get some of the pollen and nectar from the flowers, and then leave. But anything else that lands on these trees, they will attack immediately. So the part of this program is teaching the farmers the importance of these insects, of these ants. And an interesting way they propagate them is they're taught that if you run a string between trees, like you want to move the ants from one tree to another tree, is you just put a string between the two, and then you put some kind of rotten meat on the tree you want them to move to. And they'll immediately, always curious, go to that tree. They'll move their entire colony to that tree, and then you just cut the string and they remain in that tree. So it's a training that keeps the farmer from using pesticides, right? That's what we're trying to keep them from doing, to use less pesticides that could hurt the bees, and using these ants as a really great method for less pesticide use. Another thing they're taught in this program, in these cashew orchards, is to grow ginger. So ginger can easily be grown underneath these trees. It's perfect. It's dappled shade. It's rich soil, and it's a market crop. So they're taught how to propagate ginger and intercropping, and then it's a market product for them. So they have a market product under their trees. And again, that's a deterrent for them to want to spray anything on the trees. Better for the bees, better for the environment, and they have a market crop growing under the trees. So when Bees for Development comes in and does these kind of programs, they try to address kind of the whole environmental concern about bees and also the profit for the farmer. Here's just a picture I wanted to share about the first honey harvest. These women were taught beekeeping. These are all farmers. These are all people that are working in cashews, and they have done an amazing job. So it's also quite accessible to women in beekeeping. So beekeeping can be something that can really elevate a woman's role in their community and in their families by producing honey that then they can use for sales, that can drive the funding of school uniforms, things like that. Like in most of the countries we work in, a lot of the elementary school is covered, but any kind of more advanced education does come with a cost. So all of these women were very interested in income for their children. So that's what I have to say about that. So I'm going to take you to another place, another partner that we work with. So this is Keystone. I was visited here a couple of years ago. This is the Nilgiris Bioreserve. It's a beautiful part of India. The people are super nice. It's in southern India, in Tamil Nadu, and they work a lot with bees. They're about a 30-year-old nonprofit in this part of India, about the same age as Bees for Development, and they've done some beautiful work with bees that I'd like to share. The first is Apis dorsata. You might have heard of this. It's the giant honeybee. You see some of these pictures in Nepal. So these bees aren't kept in a hive. They're they just keep themselves on this one big wing of comb that you see here. It produces a beautiful honey, and the local indigenous community in this area, the Toda, are big advocates of protecting these bees, but also taking that honey harvest from them. And the interesting thing, let me just show you a couple more pictures. So this is where we saw them. They're called rock cliff bees too, because you can see there on the bottom, they're all along this rock cliff. And the interesting thing about these bees is they're migratory. So as the forage in this area dries up, they'll move and they'll reuse these combs. So these combs, they'll come back to year after year. And as they harvest the honey, they'll only harvest part of the comb. And so the bees can come back and rebuild. So Keystone looked at the idea that the honey harvests were down for the Toda, and what was causing that? And was it over harvesting? Was it what were the mechanics that were going on? So they did a really interesting study that can then kind of address some of those concerns from the Toda. And here's the results. So they had a baseline study in 2009 and then another one in 2019. And you can see the variations in rainfall, which was less rainfall, and that then changed the forage for the bees. So the variation in flowering was really the problem with the less population of the dorsata. That image on the left there, or it might be your right, I'm not sure, of this is kind of what you see of them harvesting. And if you just look right behind his back there, you can see that they've cut the comb, and that's the comb that has the honey in it. And they'll harvest that, leaving the rest of that comb for the bees to rebuild. But going back to this study, it really talks about the idea that one of those first contributing factors of what is affecting our bees, which is climate change. And this is a really tough one to tackle, because if the variation in rainfall is climate change, which then affects the flowering, it's not over harvesting. It's actually a bigger picture for them. So again, they'll harvest less, which they know not to over harvest. But anyway, it's to be more to be learned from this study. The next thing they work in is stingless bees. So this is Apis melloponi. These bees are really interesting. They're tiny little bees that produce tiny amounts of honey, but they don't sting. They kind of nibble on you. If they can get like under your shirt, they'll take a little nibble on you. And this is a picture of the size of the hive. They're just about the size of a shoebox. And you can see on the one side here, those really yellow, that bright yellow is actually their nests. So those are baby stingless bees waiting to be born. And then down below there, those are the honey pots. So they keep the honey in these kind of larger cells, and that's what you can harvest. But this isn't like honey you would like put in your tea or on your oatmeal. This is honey that is considered medicinal. It can be kind of medicinal in taste too. It can be unpleasant a little bit and taste quite strong, but there's a really strong connection to the medical use in this area and kind of for stingless bees in general. Here's a couple more images that kind of tie it into rural development, which is these can be kept in the villages, in your town, and they can be kept right under the eaves in these little shoe boxes that are easily made, and you can see it's just wired up. And then here's another picture of them. You can kind of see them on the comb there, tending to the brood, and then down below there where it's kind of wet looking, that's what you can harvest. But they'll fill this whole box up with brood and honey. I will say that there is a challenge to define the definition of what honey is, right? So in Codex, the definition is honey is nectar from plants produced by Apis mellifera. So these being dorsata and melloponi, they're not included in the definition of the honey. And there's definitely work being done in India, the Philippines, Peru, and Brazil to redefine that so that these insects and these bees and the honey they produce can be considered honey, because there's an export market for both the dorsata and for the stingless bee honey. The next one is Apis cerana. So they have really a lot of bees they're taking care of. And these are smaller. These are like our Apis mellifera. They're smaller, they're a little more gentle, but they do produce nice honey from Apis cerana. You can see this is a smaller beehive. It's probably only a foot wide, where ours are probably closer to 18 inches. And it's a kind of an easier hive to deal with as well. So Keystone's working in how do we conserve these bees? They're having the same problems with pesticides, with climate change, and conservation. So Keystone's taken the approach of working in schools and teaching children beekeeping, which I think is amazing. So this picture here is of some of the students and also some of the teachers here in the Kotagiri region of India. Down in the south too, the Nilgiris Bioreserve. So here's a couple of the students. They were so proud to show us their bees. You can see they're not wearing veils because these bees are really quite docile. They will sting you. They are kind of the sting of a honeybee as well, of like our honeybees, but very gentle bees, and also produce a smaller crop of honey than the mellifera that we use. But really important work being done, I think, globally. So it's not just about Apis mellifera or dorsata or melloponi, but as we think about bees in general, what they can do to provide income. So these children then have income from taking care of their bees and selling their honey to provide for their families as well. So just to give you some thoughts on bees and beekeeping, thank you very much. I know I'm around for questions in just a minute, so I'll be here. Thank you so much. Oh, it went 30 minutes. Oh. Jesus. It sounds so good. Well, I'm going to send it to her. Maybe it's fine.